And all I can say, Madam Speaker, is the American people deserve better. And they certainly deserve better than the Speaker of the House spending his time trying to influence our justice system at a courthouse in New York City. How pathetic. When we have real problems that we need to deal with here in this country, he's in New York trying to explain away, like a staffer, all of Donald Trump's problems, quite frankly. I'm trying to think of a way to stay with an order here with the new rules. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. That's where the Speaker of the House is spending his time, trying to rationalize all of the former president's crimes. Give me a break.
So let's revisit some of the facts. Violent crime has skyrocketed with year-over-year increases in violent crime in the millions. Carjackings have spiked by as much as 93% in many major cities. And 18% more homicides were committed in 2023 than in 2019. And it's no coincidence that many of these major cities that have been the epicenter of the wave in violent crime also happen to be run by Democratic politicians with left-wing DAs that have made it their mission not to prosecute perpetrators, but to put dangerous criminals back on the streets and to facilitate a revolving door criminal justice system. My colleagues need only to venture beyond Capitol Hill to see what these policies have done to our nation's capital.
The gentleman from New York, sometimes I wonder whether he really believes the stuff that he says. He keeps talking about crime in Democrat-run cities. By the way, it's Democratic-run cities. But the last time I checked, we don't have Democrat cities or Republican cities in this country. We have American cities. But I took the liberty of looking up some of the headlines from New York's 23rd Congressional District that Mr. Langworthy represents, and in particular Jamestown, New York, the largest city in the area and the location of his district office. Jamestown has a Republican mayor, a Republican city council, a Republican supermajority on the county legislature, a Republican state representative, a Republican state senator, a Republican congressman. So let's look at some of the recent headlines from the Republican stronghold of Jamestown, New York. April 22, 2024. Jamestown man accused of killing 16-month-old child charged with manslaughter. March 2024. 1 dead, 2 injured in Jamestown homicide. January 2024, investigation underway in Jamestown homicide case. May 2023, 3 accused of stealing a vehicle in Jamestown. June 2021, 2 teenage girls charged with arson in connection with Jamestown furniture manufacturer fire. February 2024, 6 arrested after robbery. Assault leads to standoff in Jamestown, New York. I could go on and on and on. And Madam Speaker, none of this is to disparage the wonderful people who Mr. Langworthy represents. But if he wants to come down here and read off RNC talking points about crime, I think he should at least try to be intellectually honest. Now, I know the other side wants to play the blame game. I know Republicans are all about stunts and not solutions. But maybe, just maybe, they ought to look in the mirror first instead of playing to the cheap seats.
I want to take a minute to address some untrue statements about this bill that we're considering here today. Falsehoods that have been perpetuated by activists on the outside and some on the inside, even on this committee, to try and distract from the fact that they never intended to vote for or support a piece of legislation that was a good, robust, and working safety net for America's agricultural producers. Farm Food and National Security Act makes the most significant investments in the farm safety net since 2002. These investments are long overdue and necessary to help producers survive due to the increased cost of inflation on the farm.
This was an opportunity for Democrats and Republicans to put aside partisanship and work together to make life better for people. And my Republican friends have thrown that all down the drain so they can appease their far-right fringe. And if you look at this bill, if you think this bill is bad now, just wait until the Looney Tunes and the Rules Committee get their hands on it. And I say this with some firsthand experience. This awful bill will become awfuler. I doubt they would even vote for this, given how much it blows up the deficit. They won't vote for 40 cents in additional spending, let alone a bill that blows up the deficit by $40 billion. Mr. Chairman, when everything is said and done, it is clear we just don't share the same values. This bill cuts future SNAP benefits by $30 billion. That's not my estimate. It's not Ranking Member Scott's estimate. It comes from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. You can try to hide the cut in the miscellaneous title, hide it in Donald Trump's shower next to the classified documents if you want to. But we here on the Democratic side are going to tell the truth. This bill will hurt every SNAP recipient in future years. Kids, seniors, people with disabilities, vulnerable adults. Freezing benefits by blocking a meaningful increase will mean families run out of money for food earlier in the month. The average SNAP benefit is a little over $2 per person per meal. If Republicans think that's enough, they should try living off of it. Come on, let's get real. You guys love to complain about the cost of food, but then you propose a farm bill that actually prevents us from doing anything to help people pay for food. Mr. Chairman, I think the members of this committee know where I stand on this bill by now. This bill is a disaster. It's a disaster for America's farmers. It's a disaster for America's families. It is a disaster for America's environment. And it is a disaster for America's workers. You know who this bill is a big win for? It's a win for CEOs and C-suites that have never worked in a field for a day in their lives. It's a win for people with luxury beachfront properties and fancy high-rise apartments who make their money screwing over our family farmers. That's who benefits most from this bill, the rich and the powerful, and it's a damn shame. Republicans made a deliberate choice to prioritize their own far right instead of trying to work with Democrats. And as a result, this is a bill that will never become law. But since this is where we are, let's just talk about how bad this bill is. We've been losing family farms in this country since the Nixon administration told farmers, get big or get out. If this farm bill were to become law, things would get a hell of a lot worse. Republicans want to starve out family farms. They're funneling resources to those at the top while taking away support for independent farmers. And they're obsessed with taking away the tools our farmers need to survive the climate crisis. The Inflation Reduction Act empowers our farmers to operate sustainably so they can be resilient in the face of crazy weather. And that is crazy weather that's an existential threat to their operations. This bill says to farmers, you're on your own. Republicans are also taking away states' rights to make their own decisions about things like animal welfare and pesticide safety. And when it comes to nutrition, this is just more of the same nasty, mean attacks on people struggling to make ends meet. Look, here is the reality. My friends on the other side live in a privileged bubble, and they wrote a farm bill that reflects that, a farm bill that benefits rich people and big companies and huge farms that put family farms in my district out of business. And what I am just shocked by is the callousness and lack of empathy with which this is being done.
Hamas is responsible for this war. Hamas, a terrorist organization, has for decades now used civilian structures and innocent people to shield their terrorist operations. But, Madam Speaker, none of that stopped anti-Israel protesters from taking to the streets just a day after the horrific attacks and the butchery of Israeli civilians to chant from the river to the sea. There's some people that serve in this building that take their time and like to chant from the river to the sea. And they need to be held accountable for that, which we know is synonymous language with the extermination of the Jewish people in Israel. We are learning more and more about the left-wing groups and donors that are bankrolling the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic protests that have erupted across the country. We know that the far left, including members of the House, that have fully endorsed this message to turn against our ally Israel in their hour of need, and to isolate them and to ultimately support their destruction. Madam Speaker, I am done hearing the false equivalencies of a morally bankrupt movement.
We haven't heard a single word from our colleagues across the aisle acknowledging the very real challenges civilians in Gaza are experiencing every day under this war. Not a single word. If we send massive 2,000-pound bombs to Netanyahu without any assurances on how they will be used, it could mean unprecedented, catastrophic civilian casualties. I mean, these are people that we are talking about, innocent people, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, moms and dads, grandparents, babies. Where is our humanity? Where is our humanity? These are people who are already struggling with shortages of food, water, shelter, medical supplies, the basic things that humans need to survive. They fled to Rafah because that's where Netanyahu told them to go to escape the bombing of Hamas. And now Netanyahu is saying he is going to bomb them anyways, and there's no plan to safely evacuate them to any other place. I don't care what any country does, but killing civilians, I don't care whether there's another country that does it, but killing civilians is wrong, always wrong, always wrong. And you can be a friend of Israel, a strong ally of Israel, and also be a critic when it comes to the Netanyahu government. You can be a strong friend of Israel and say that more massive civilian casualties will undercut Israel's security. This is not the way to go. This is not the way to go. And you can feel, as I do, that what happened on October 7th, the horrific attack by Hamas on Israeli civilians, is unconscionable. Adjectives are not enough. There are not enough adjectives to describe how horrific that is. The taking of hostages is a war crime. We want them released. You can feel that way, but also understand that we have an obligation to protect civilian lives in Gaza.
I'd also like to speak in support of Resolution 1213, which denounces calls to defund the police, which have been so damaging to public safety and to law enforcement across this country. In my own state, in California, we have a number of jurisdictions like San Francisco, like in the East Bay, like in Los Angeles, that did defund police and were then forced to restore that funding and to backtrack. But the reality is, this is just one of a number of policies that have caused crime in California and many other places in this country to spiral out of control and have made the job of our law enforcement officers more and more difficult, to the point at which many departments are having a very difficult time with recruitment and retention and making sure they are fully staffed and have the personnel that they need to keep their communities safe. So I urge strong bipartisan support for this resolution denouncing calls to defund the police, and I hope that we can swing the pendulum further in the direction of the support that our law enforcement so deserves, so that we don't continue to face these problems with recruitment and retention, and we can keep our communities safe. Thank you, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserved. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I'm not familiar with the gentleman who just spoke from California, but let me say to him that rather than just, denounce the slogan of defunding the police, maybe the gentleman should go to the Republican Study Committee and tell them to not defund the police. Because again, if you go to the Republican Study Group document, go to page 148, it is clear that the Republicans wanted to fund the COPS program. So please, enough with the rhetoric. If you are serious about supporting the police, then don't cut the COPS program, period. How hard is this? How hard is this? And I would also say remind the gentleman that the hometown of the former Republican Speaker of this House, before the Republicans threw him out, Kevin McCarthy, which is Bakersfield, California, has a higher crime rate than San Francisco. I mean, I don't even know where my friends are coming from. And the gentleman from New York, I got to say, I've never heard anybody denounce their home state as much as I've heard him denounce New York. I mean, I think New York is a great state, not as good as Massachusetts, but I think it's a great state. But I get it. He just explained it all to me. If it's a Democratic-controlled area, all the crime is blamed on the Democrat. If it's a Republican-controlled area, then they find the nearest Democrat and they blame it on the Democrat. That's the rationale. I mean, come on. This place has to get more serious in terms of supporting initiatives to actually not only support law enforcement, but to protect our communities instead of like one soundbite after another that does absolutely nothing, and the blame game that we hear constantly. Please. Madam Speaker, my Republican colleagues this week claim they want to focus on public safety, but have chosen to put misguided measures and messaging bills on the floor. Well, here's their chance to actually do something of substance that will actually make police officers safer, make our streets safer, and make our children safer. Now, I know that, like me, many of my colleagues have children, and all of them have elementary schools and middle schools in their districts, and I know they see the toll it is taking on our nation's children, our most vulnerable. Nearly 60% of teachers are worried about a shooting happening in their school, and 1 in 4 had a gun-related lockdown during the last school year. According to the Pew Research Center, 1 in 5 parents were extremely concerned about their child getting shot, and Republican leadership want to do just nothing. Want to do nothing. This is barbaric. It is past time, Madam Speaker, and we are ready to work in a bipartisan way to end the epidemic of gun violence in this country.